He's a six-time memory champion. So he's a memory athlete. He memorizes things for a living. And he was approached, to make a long story short, by a hedge fund looking to train people in remote viewing in order to play the stock market. So using associative remote viewing.
Bit of a living legend, really. What was your experience with
Mm,
him?
it was great. It was very positive. I met Chris through Ryan Bledsoe, his son, from his podcast, Bledsoe Said So, and ended up meeting Joe McMoneagle, talked to Uri Geller, met with Ed Dames, met with Ed May, who was the chief research physicist for Stargate at the time, and it started occurring to me that this is real. This is actually happening. There's a lot of money put into this, and it's not that hard to do. I had a couple spontaneous out of body experiences post the remote viewing stuff. But I kept at it and I kept meditating every day for an hour for like 3 or 4 months. And then eventually at home, I started leaving my body regularly.
The following is a conversation with Chris Ramsay. Chris is a hugely successful magician, illusionist, and storyteller, known for his mind-bending tricks, cinematic visuals, and the way he captivates audiences. With over 7 million subscribers on his magic, puzzles, and vlogging YouTube channel, Chris has built an empire of wonder. But in recent years, he's taken that same artistic flair and deep curiosity into the world of UFOs, launching Area 52 Investigations, a channel that's rapidly becoming a key voice in the UAP field. Chris has a rare talent. He doesn't just present information, he brings it to life. His ability to weave human stories, nostalgia, and stunning cinematography into his work makes him one of the most compelling figures in the UFO space today, in my opinion. Now, in this episode, we dive into everything from his own out of body experiences to his work on the Chris Bledsoe documentary, his investigations into the phenomena, and what disclosure really means for all of us. It was an absolute honour to have this conversation. Chris is a massive inspiration for me, and he doesn't disappoint. They say never meet your idols, but I think that's nonsense. He's an awesome guy, and I can't wait for you to hear this one. So let's get into it. The following is a conversation with Chris Ramsay. Can I just ask where did the shift come from? Obviously, you were sort of deep into the magic and the illusions and these really incredible sort of puzzles and mystery of them. Where did the UFO stuff come in?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I follow you on Instagram. You're one of my go-to, accounts to get news. You're so thorough. You're really on point, and you post possibly, I think, before anybody else. Like, I mean, if you're, looking to get the news straight away and get the, unbiased version, this is the reason I follow you. So thank
Oh,
you for all
thanks,
you
man.
do.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm very obsessive. I think that's my problem is very obsessive
Yeah.
with
Well,
posting, but no, I appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, and I'm obsessive with what I do, so I think it's mutually appreciated. I got into this space. I got into this space. I mean, I've been interested in UFOs and aliens ever since I was like 9 years old. I watched Fire in the Sky.
Yeah.
Probably not a movie you should watch when you're nine, but um, it really changed me. Reading the caption, the spoiler before the show or before the movie said based on a true story. And, hearing that from an adult as a young, impressionable child, left a real mark on me. So I was like, whoa, hold on. Aliens are real, I guess. And, and then all sorts of other wild things throughout that movie that really haunted me, obviously. So I've always really kept tabs on it. And then up in, I think I want to say 2012, I had started going down like Phil Schneider rabbit holes and like Bill Cooper, Al Bielek, and Bob Lazar and all this really intensely, somewhat too intense sometimes. You get too dark and you're like, oh my God, what do we do? And how do we stop this? And then you realize, well, the nihilism kicks in. You're kind of like, well, let's just enjoy the ride. Um, and then a few years ago, I had a friend of mine, Nelson Dellis. I have a friend. He's a six-time memory champion. So he's a memory athlete. He memorizes things for a living. And he was approached, to make a long story short, by a hedge fund looking to train people in remote viewing in order to play the stock market. So using associative remote viewing. And he thought this was really interesting. He didn't believe in it. This guy's, studied physics in university and really sort of left brain character. And yet he was like, you know what? Let me try it out. He did it for a month. They trained him an hour a day for a month. And then he started getting really interesting results. Now, obviously, with remote viewing, like you don't always know what the target is or if you got it right or wrong. All he knew that they would, keep coming back to him for these sessions, and he got paid. So he told me this, and I was like, that's wild. And it also rings a bell. I remember watching some old documentary about psychic spies in Russia, and also probably catching it on some Unsolved Mysteries episode. As a magician, someone who studies mentalism as well, I was very interested for a multitude of reasons. One, I was interested in like sort of the debunking side of it. It's like, oh, is this just like BS? And the other side, I was like, well, is there something there? And so I came into it with this skepticism, did it for like a year, documented that whole journey, and ended up meeting Joe McMoneagle, talked to Uri Geller, met with Ed Dames, met with Ed May, who was the chief research physicist for Stargate at the time. And it started occurring to me that this is real. This is actually happening. There's a lot of money put into this, and it's not that hard to do. And it's just another form of intel that they would have used that's super cheap. Like, why wouldn't you try it, right? And that's why they did it for 20 years. And so when that really dawned on me, it kind of shifted my ontology a little bit. I was like, this is brand new to me. Now, I always, as a magician, was just a really reticent about this stuff. I was an absolute skeptic. And so I had to change all that. And now I had all this footage. And I'm like, this doesn't necessarily fit into the magic category anymore. And so I thought, what an idea. Let's just start a new venture. Let's start a new channel, because I was really pumped with this. And I wanted to see, as soon as I got done with this, I was like, well, what's next? And then I started going into the out of body stuff. I even went into some life between life stuff and some past life regression things that I'm still kind of working on. And, it just led me down this incredible rabbit hole. And it also allowed me to be sort of fulfill this creative obsession that I have, which wasn't necessarily being fulfilled with the current content that I was creating. And so I thought, man, if I could just shift into this stuff, I know that I'd be, leagues happier in terms of just creative expression. And so thankfully, I stuck with it, did it long enough, and then it kind of popped off to where it is now. And I'm just trying to maintain the momentum at this point.
Yeah, and you've got some hell of a momentum going at the moment. I mean, your style is so unique, and I remember seeing one of your videos pop up a while back, and I didn't realize at that point. I mean, I think because I'm so focused on just what I'm doing and everything new that's coming in, all the news and all that sort of stuff, that I don't so much watch other channels as much and other interviews. But then your interviews start popping up, and then I'm looking and thinking, he's got some skill, and the so polished and this nostalgic feel to it. Where does that come from? I mean, you've got a very, very unique visual presentation style that I haven't seen with anybody else. And the rest of us, me included, we've got a fairly standard kind of format where talking head stuff, and yours is so visual and very, very artistic. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I thought that was so I've always, thought if you can't be better, be different. And, you know, what I lack in perhaps knowledge that you might have on the topic or so many others, I tend to try and make up for with this sort of artistic creative expression and the storytelling. Because I think, you know, I do think the medium is the message to some extent, like to get people to latch onto these complex ideas that really make them question their own reality. Just sometimes giving them the straight facts doesn't end up sticking.
Yeah.
And so if I can deliver less facts, perhaps, or not less facts, but just less amount, but do it in a way that draws them in. And those ideas tend to like latch on. It's like when you're immersed in a book versus you're at university and they tell you to read this book. You're just going to retain so much more information if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so that's always been my goal, is like, hey, if I'm going to talk about this subject that's very complex and perhaps, for hours on end, A, I'm competing with a million other creators, and B, people have stuff to do. They got things to do. It's the reason why these, scrolling platforms have really popped off in the last few years, because people just want to optimize their intake of information. They want to shorten that amount of time that they intake. And so to counterbalance that, or to, counteract that, I decided, well, I have to immerse them. I have to create this fictional bubble that they can sit in willingly, and not feel like they're being tricked into watching my content, which, a lot of the bigger creators have fallen down that path of algorithm manipulation. And it really does kind of feel like poison, and it feels like you're taking advantage. It's kind of like those Jewel Quest games. It's just kind of crack for your mind. And I wanted to alleviate that a little bit. I wanted you to feel that feeling like when, you were watching one of your favorite shows, when you were, or one of your favorite movies, like seeing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that cinematic, just the aspect ratio of the 35 millimeter, and the color grading and the sound design and everything else just made me feel like I wanted to sit in that moment forever. And that's kind of how I treat, these videos that I do. I think, for me anyways, it's an important part of the creation process to love what you do, because I know all too well that if I don't, I'll end up burning out. And so I think part of that artistic expression that you're, noticing throughout the videos, with the props and the lighting, and all the different storytelling elements, part of it is for the audience, obviously, but part of it is just for me to keep it fresh and fun.
Yeah, yeah. I understand exactly what you mean. I I have this thing with music, like the real obsession with music, and I'll spend hours and hours. I find a video that's 30 seconds long, and I'll spend 2 hours trying to match a song to it. Think I'm going to put that in a story, and it's going to disappear in 24 hours, and only like maybe like 0.5% of the people that follow the account will see it. But I've got to do it anyway. There's some
Yeah.
very strange obsession. But I understand it's that kind of something unique and something that feels, and it ignites something inside of you. It's that mixture of the creativity, and I see that in your work. I think it reminds me of a lot of stuff from, back in the sort of cultural mix of the UFO UAP subjects, the sort of mystery, I guess, and our childhood with things like ET. Like, I'll often ask people, what first piqued your interest, and they'll often say, tracing it back to childhood, and ET or the X Files or whatever, and it's this cultural mix of stuff that just sticks out, the nostalgia of it, I guess. And I think you've got some incredible thing where you're kind of creating that new nostalgia, like in real time. It's really impressive, man. Really impressive,
Thank
genuinely.
you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, genuinely. Okay, so what can I ask? I've heard that you'd been to the Monroe Institute. Is that true? You had a sort of experience there, and I'm looking at going at some point this year, hopefully. So I'm really
Mm.
fascinated if I could get an idea of how your experience was, if you're sort of
Yeah,
comfortable talking about it.
absolutely. Yes, and let me know, because I will put you in touch with someone there. They're looking to broaden their reach, and so anytime there's a creator on the platform that wants, or on any platform that wants to go there, part of their goal and their mission is to really get more people to experience this. And so I'll be able to potentially hook you up there where I
Awesome,
can.
brilliant.
And I don't get anything from that. I just think, as someone who did it, I see the value in everybody doing this, and the more people that can hear about it and end up going, I really do think that the world will benefit from that. So, yeah, this happened. So I had a couple spontaneous out of body experiences post the remote viewing stuff. So I did the remote viewing stuff, met Joe McMoneagle, and a few months later, and Joe had, said to me that he used to go to Monroe to visit Bob on the weekends, because the CIA had asked him to attempt lucid dreaming or out of body sort of astral projecting, to see if it could enhance the remote viewing accuracy, which it did in turn. But there aren't a lot of people that can actually get to those states. It takes practice, it takes time. But Joe, it came fairly natural to him. So he explained this to me, and while I'm listening to him, I'm kind of thinking, does he mean dreaming? Does he just mean lucid dreaming? Like, I've had those, like I've flown in my dreams type deal. And so it never really registered. This astral projecting was kind of still foreign to me. I didn't know what it was. And then I think like a month or two after that, might have been just like a month after I met him, I was I had quit smoking marijuana recreationally, which I used to do just at nighttime. You know, it's legal here, so no problem with that. But I felt like it hindered me and it made me a little too foggy. So I just given it up. And about a week later, actually exactly a week later, I was having a hard time falling asleep due to the same reasons. And I decided to take a melatonin, which is also something you can get sort of over the counter here. And what I didn't know was those two things combined for me at the time, and I don't condone doing any of this, but for me at the time created some type of perfect storm where apparently if you consume, alcohol or regularly intake cannabis, you create something called a REM rebound. And basically the REM your REM that you use up during your REM cycles builds up like a floodgate. And when you stop, it just kind of rushes open and you get these insane lucid dreaming experiences and all this. Well, melatonin also has the same effect where it ramps up the REM. And I didn't know this either. So I take this, I go to bed, and I had some nightmare. I don't really remember. I remember waking up and like peeling my eyes open and being in my bed. And now it's kind of like fuzzy. There's this buzzing, this energetic vibration, kind of like a giant tuning fork was like in my body. I was just kind of like buzzing. And I had this impression that I could just lift up. And I started lifting, out of my bed. And I was like, what's happening? I got so terrified that I ended up like going back into my body. I was awake the rest of the night. My heart was pounding. And I thought the next night, let me try it again. I did it again, and it happened again. And this time I decided I'm not going to be scared. I'm going to control this. And I get up and I get out, and I didn't realize I was out of my body. I thought it was just floating, which was scary in itself, because it didn't feel like a dream. And so I remember looking back and seeing myself laying there and seeing myself with my eyes closed, which is like a really weird and terrifying thing to look at and to perceive, because it's not something that's natural, and it looks almost foreign to see yourself in that way. So it was like, who is that? I'm like, oh my god, that's me, and scared me even more. And so I left it at that. I kind of like Googled a bunch of like things and found that all the symptoms that I had were those of people who had out of body experiences. And I decided to just kind of leave it at that, because like after time passed, you kind of, maybe it was a dream, maybe it was something. But then I'd heard about the Monroe Institute. And to answer your question, I reached out to them and I thought maybe this was like some cosmic sign for me to pursue this, just like I'd pursued Stargate. And this is Gateway, the process which they taught a lot of these CIA guys back in the day, these intelligence folks, and how to leave the body using hemisync or binaural beats, and through a series of meditations, guided meditations by Bob Monroe, which I read his book, and he also went through the exact same thing I did, or I went through what he did. I hit up Paul Citarella, who's the VP at Monroe, and I was like, hey, is there a possibility that I could film at Monroe? And at first it was like, absolutely not. We've never let anyone film the Gateway process ever. It was just like secret. You had to pay for it, and it was like all you got to pay for this, and you can't take it. It was all this like, and I was like, man, that really bugs me. I really want to like document this. And he called me back and he's like, you know what? We've been meaning to like broaden our reach finally. And so he invited me to a creator camp with other creators in hopes, spread the message. I went there, met some amazing people, learned how to meditate through the tapes, the Gateway tapes. Didn't have, I had like amazing experiences there, and I documented the whole thing. Vibratory senses, all types of like almost hallucinogenic visions during these meditations, but never an out of body. But I kept at it, and I kept meditating every day for an hour for like 3 or 4 months. And then eventually at home, I started leaving my body regularly. So like I said, I documented everything. It's all there. And the last one that really shook me was it happened in broad daylight during like a waking state meditation. It was early in the morning, it was like 6:30 in the morning, sun was peering in the room, and I was laying down in my bed, and I had just taken off the headphones. I'd done an hour of meditation. I put the headphones down. I closed my eyes. Not 2 seconds later, in my head, I said, I deeply desire to leave my body. I felt this vibratory sense, this familiar sense that you feel. And I started sort of floating in my body. This is like my body, and this is me just like kind of like moving around in my body. Very bizarre. And I knew that I can get up and get out. And I had just closed my eyes. So I knew this was lucid. This wasn't a dream. I didn't click out at any part. And then, yeah, got up. Demanded clarity so I could start seeing through my eyelids somehow. I saw my room. I got up to the window and I was going out the window. And then I hear a female voice say, "What are you doing?" And scared the crap out of me. I didn't look where that sound was coming. I just kind of saw my body and I was like, I'm just going to lay back down. And I woke up. And that was like a minute and a half to like 2 minutes of time, that whole experience. And it was from a waking state. And so that really messed me up. That was like one of those things where I'd left my body plenty of times, but they've always happened in or around sleep. This was completely awake, just very relaxed. And that was the last time that it happened. I stopped doing it after that, not because I was scared, just because I kind of got what I wanted from it.
Yeah.
I still meditate, just not as intensely. But yeah, if you're willing to put the work in, I highly recommend doing it. I've dabbled with DMT since, because somebody told me, well, you left the body, naturally, you should try DMT. And I did it, had an amazing experience, but also kind of felt like going out of the body sober.
Yeah.
And so I recommend to anybody who did DMT, take some time, take a few months, meditate daily, and you might get some really crazy experiences, without having to partake in any substances.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Incredible. I'm excited about it. Definitely. Super excited about it. I'm interested in the sort of hitchhiker effect. Excuse me.
Mm.
The sort of hitchhiker effect of having, and we hear it quite a bit with people like Elizondo. He's talked about it, but I'm really interested in other people that interview, and more so people like yourself who do a lot of in-person stuff, because I think it would feel to be more powerful in person. Have you had any sort of strange experiences after you've had contact with some of these people, some of the people that have been deep in these sort of different spaces, different areas of the phenomena? Has anything sort of
Mm.
stayed behind, or any strange activities or strange happenings as a result, do you think?
I don't think so. No. Um, Although I haven't been on the lookout for it, maybe I've been busy, but no, I really, I don't think so. And I've had nothing but really good experiences doing, whether it's the podcast or the meditations or anything else. And um, I do believe that intention drives a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe on some level, your negative intention collapses some type of wave function in a way that creates this, scenario in which these perceptibly negative things, perceivably, happen. But I definitely try to keep like more or less like a positive mind state through journaling and manifesting, meditating, really trying to keep in good health and eating properly and doing all these things to keep things on my side. But I'm never really giving that any thought.
Yeah.
So I think the hitchhiker effect, this is my like personal theory or maybe hypothesis, but like those things I think do exist if you give them intention. Just like, if you're anxious or something, or if a lot of people develop, physical illnesses due to stress, that's literally a manifestation due to a mind state, right? A physical manifestation. I think the same goes with anything else, whether negative or positive. It's really about intention.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that came to me a little while ago because I'd had like a marathon of interviews with a few people. I think it sort of ended with just a super long interview with Jack Sarfati. If you know Jack, and we'd just finished. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I think I'd never seen anything unusual in the sky. I mean, aside from what I could assign a conventional explanation to, but I'd heard so many people's stories that people I've spoken to and cases that I've seen and footage people have sent me, but I'd never physically seen anything. I really wanted to. And I think I let my dogs out, 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, and just, tired from just constant thinking about this subject and speaking to these really intense people, ending with Jack Sarfati, who's super intense, lots of fun, but super intense. And then I went outside and saw something, and it made me think about that sort of, I don't know if it's a hitchhiker effect or it's putting you into a state
Mm.
because you're spending so much time. I don't know what it is, but I was just wondered. I just wondered if you know if you'd experienced anything like that. But
I think there's something there, though. I think, like, we do hear these stories where the minute you start observing it, it starts observing you, and all of this. I think there is something there, but to your point, it might be that that's where your headspace was, and maybe during that time, maybe you are attracting the phenomenon more, or maybe you're just aware of the phenomenon, or
yeah,
subconsciously know where to look when it happens, or who knows, or maybe a mix of everything. But
yeah,
I definitely do think there is a link, to the unconscious and the phenomenon. I think that, goes to that saying, the amount of people you've interviewed. I think, that the data shows that there is some type of connection with the unconscious mind here,
yeah, yeah.
or the subconscious. Yeah.
I saw your your documentary with Chris Bledsoe. You went out to
Mm,
visit Chris, didn't you? That was firstly fantastic job. Really, really,
thank you.
really great documentary. And I remember watching it thinking, this guy's just there's no end to your talents. But it was great to see that because seeing him, on lots of podcasts and posts and stuff on the internet, but then actually like a real personal, in close, in depth, going out and visiting him was fantastic. What was it like? Because he's a big deal, isn't he, in this space, in this sort of UFO UAP space, a bit of a living legend, really. What was your experience with
Mm.
him?
It was great. It was very positive. I met Chris through Ryan Bledsoe, his son, from his podcast. Bledsoe said so. Ryan and I met at the Monroe Retreat. So, and I had already read Chris Bledsoe's book by then. So naturally, I was like, "Wow, can I meet your father? Can we get out there and do something?" He made it happen. To his credit, he hooked me up with that interaction, and since then, Chris and I have been communicating and everything else. And he was just so welcoming, as he is with so many people. Everybody who meets the man will tell you the same thing. He's genuinely like a good-hearted person. Like, this, not just him, but his entire family. Yvonne, his wife, and just all the kids and everybody that goes around them are just the greatest people. They live very humbly. They're not. People think, oh, the grifting and all this. Like, you go to his house, man. It's like it's a tiny little house. It's not, you know,
Yeah.
they live just very simply, and they don't need much, and they're happy with what they got, and it's just all family oriented. So wholesome, I think, would be, all in all, the experience that I had. I was happy to be able to tell Chris's story the way that I did, in light of his recent appearance on the Sean Ryan podcast. Now, I'd filmed I'd filmed Chris's interview right around the same time I think Sean Ryan filmed Chris' interview, which is back in September.
Okay.
And I, being a one-man team, was just like editing the crap out of this video in the small pockets of time that I had between the weekly posts, and I was like, this is going to be one of those longer edits. And I remember being really close to the end, to the finishing line with the edit in this. And then Sean Ryan dropped this podcast. And I remember thinking, like, how serendipitous that, like my edit's almost done. And there was, like, I don't know. I just felt like it was cool that it came out right after, because I think Chris wasn't too happy with certain things that were apparently done in, perhaps allegedly, the edit with Sean Ryan's podcast. But also, aside from all that stuff, which I don't know anything about, the vibe, it was very cold. And it
Mm.
was not the Chris I got to know. And he was just sat in a chair. You could tell he was nervous. He was out of his element. He was wearing a suit. It was like there's so much distance between these two chairs. It was dark. And, not to knock Sean Ryan, his podcast does really well. He interviews a lot of people. But the contrast that I saw with the Chris that I met was sat in his backyard next to this little pond
Yeah.
with, like, the bugs and the birds going. And it was just such a calming, beautiful experience between Chris and I. And then I see this interview here where it's almost like an interrogation style, and very, I just felt like the energy was off. I wasn't seeing the Chris that I had met. And so I was so pumped and so proud that I could be able to deliver what I did in light of that and be like, you know, I want to show you the Chris that I met.
Yeah.
Now, whether what he's saying is true or not, or will happen or not, is not for me to say. You take the information and do with that what you will. I really believe in that. But the genuineness of the interaction, I think, definitely, I don't know. I think it was well worthwhile that that side of him was shown as well. And I'm glad that I was, able to be someone who could tell that side of the story because it truly is a remarkable story.
Yeah. Yeah, you really captured the human element, and I think it was that's why I was so impressed. 'Cause I was like, this, I'm not. It sounds like I'm just throwing compliments, sort of insincerely, but I genuinely, when I watched it, I was like, how is he able to cover all of these different things and be really really good at these things and still get this just real human element of like a highly polished documentary that's got a whole team of people and writers and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, I'm sure this guy's like on his own or maybe a couple of people. Very, very impressive. But no, you did. You genuinely did. And I remember watching that thinking, he's a totally different person to everything else that I've seen online. And, it's an art form being able to capture that, I think. It really is. And having,
Yeah.
dipping my toe into this sort of field of trying to do documentaries myself at very, very early stages and seeing how difficult it is to do that and to really capture the essence. Because in your head, when you're there, you're feeling this sort of emotion and this storyline in your head, and then you try and put it on the screen. It's like, well, that's nothing. I'm not seeing what I'm experiencing in my head on the screen. It's really, really difficult. So you did an amazing job there,
Thank
genuinely.
you. Yeah. And the immensity of his story. He's got the book, sold super well. So there's like just tons of people from around the world that follow Chris
Yeah.
and follow his story. And there's just a lot of weight to editing a video like that, which I did feel. I did feel that weight. I don't feel it often because I feel like I'm just going to tell the story that I think is the best, in the way that I know how. But this time I was like, especially with the Sean Ryan stuff coming out, I feel like there's like an extra pressure here for this to be received in a certain way that allows you to hear the story, but not necessarily, forces you to believe any of it. It kind of leaves it open. That's kind of what I wanted. I wanted you to be able to decide for yourself whether or not, you think this happened. And I think with everything that I was given and everything that I shown, I think that you can do that by the end, or at least have a better idea of what you think happened. Yeah. So, but yeah, thank you for the compliments. I do appreciate it. That one was really near and dear to me in terms of production. So I'm glad it resonated.
Yeah, you smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. What's the plan going forward then? Have you got any more of these sort of in-person going out documentaries? Are you doing more of the sort of interviews or the storytelling,
Mhm.
cases? What's the plan going forward?
Yeah, definitely. That was the initial plan for the channel, was to only do these boots on the ground type things. As I'm getting older, I don't feel like traveling 9 times a month. Jesse Michaels, credit to him. This guy is a machine. He
Yeah.
goes everywhere. He's just living at airports. I can't do it. So, the channel for me is now going to be a mix of three things. I think the in-person interviews, getting people, in the skiff, and we have that discussion there. Then we have like some of the solo sort of document read-throughs that we do. And then the last one, which will be fewer and far between, which will be these investigations that I'm working on. And these are like the longer edits. They are heavier, but they are essentially, like you said, they're like mini docs. They are documentaries, I think. Um, and so I do have a few things, a few separate investigations currently happening, that I'm piecing together. And I'm also helping, I'm working with Jesse on some other projects. This will be for I think his channel. And so, you know, I just I just feel like there's so many stories to be told in this space. And if I can help tell them in any way, and I know Jesse feels the same, then whatever I can do to help, get the story out in the best possible way. I think we're long overdue for that. This space has been riddled with tropey sort of hokiness, attached to it, as was the magic space that I was in as well. And it is something else to have to readily combat against the successful, smear campaign that was run by the U.S. government in the UFO field. To bring seriousness to the topic on a platform like YouTube, which is known for like clickbait and everything else. Like it's tough, right? And so, but it's something that I think is worthwhile. And as long as YouTube allows me to like keep doing these like documentaries without punishing me for them, I will continue to do them because I think it's so cool that we get to do that and I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have to have it approved by a network or some, greedy producer or whatever. I can just do anything I want to do. And, that's why I enjoy content like yours as well. And like Jesse's and UAP Gerb and even, Richard Dolan. And there's just so many people that are putting out true content in this space. And I think that needs to be, I think the bar needs to be raised to a point where it's just absolutely unignorable for mainstream, for everybody. And they kind of understand that this is a serious topic. Although it can be fun, whimsical, and full of folly, I love that. But it's also very, very serious. And, whatever we can do to get people's eyes on it, I think that, I'm happy to be a part of that.
Yeah. And a big part of that, I think, is to bring new people in, isn't it? And bring new generations into the subject, or perhaps people that have had an interest some years ago and they're sort of popping themselves back into it, and it's because of engaging content, artistic, engaging content like yours, and I think that's really important. How do you feel about How do you feel about where things stand at the moment? We talk about the big D word, the disclosure word, and it's thrown around as we need the government to tell us, and the government are going to tell us no, they're not. They're going to lie to us. Yes, they are going to tell us, but it's going to be a specific narrative. And I'm almost myself. I'm almost in a position where I don't, report on it, and it's interesting to see what they say and do. But I almost don't care anymore. I feel like it's our job, and we need to go out and find it. And in the same way you were talking about, telling the stories of people and getting that information out there for people to make up their own minds and to use in a useful way. How do you feel? I mean, do you feel that way? Do you think it's a positive new administration coming in? Do you think we might get something, or you not pay a lot of attention to
Uh,
it?
I mean, I pay attention to it as much as anybody, I think, in the field, but I try not to, throw any energy at it. I think it was Kelly Chase
Mm.
recently who had said there's a difference between disclosure and ufology, and I love that. I'm a fan of ufology.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of disclosure, TM. I think that I think disclosure is a personal thing. I don't think you're going to get it like from scripture. I don't think you're going to get it from a redacted file or your whatever senator, governor telling you that it's real. I don't think that'll. I think if you're not ready for it, it's just not going to stick anyways. So for some people, for most people, I think disclosure is gradual. I think it is a slow burn. And with the help of all of these content creators, these documentaries that are being made, the news, News Nation covering all the disclosure stuff, but also, the science fiction movies and everything. I think all of that just kind of shapes our narrative a little bit more and our outlook towards this phenomenon in ways that lessens this ontological blow and that prepares us for something, at least subconsciously, if not, fully. And so for me, like I often wondered, I'm sure you do too, like how would I act, if like an alien just right there, and he was right there looking at me, like how would I feel, and I like to imagine scenarios in my head where I'd be like totally calm and connected with it telepathically, but the truth of the matter is I'd probably throw my coffee mug at its head and run for the door. Like that's
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like when
yeah.
people say they want disclosure with a big D, even people seasoned in the topic and who are very familiar with this would probably react, in the worst possible way. There are maybe some of those people among us who would make better ambassadors than I, but I think for the most part, yeah, I would drop kick the shit out of that alien dude if I saw that. I'm just saying, like, and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to. I want to be the guy that's super calm, but that's you're getting one of these and so that being said, I think it's important to just keep having this conversation. If the president says they're real, there's probably most people don't trust the government now, anyways. The American government, that is. They've ran numerous polls. They just don't trust the government. So why would it change anything if the government said they're real and they're here and even showed you an alien? You still wouldn't trust them.
Yeah.
They've lost that trust. And so play the scenario out in your head. Let's say you get all that and still people are on the fence and they're like, nah, I don't know if I believe it. Like, what is it?
Mm.
Right. So I do think it's a slow burn. I think it's like, let's get people interested. Let's not scare people. Let's just get them interested in these stories and these human stories of contact, of experience, of sightings. And through that, generate enough interest to where they start seeking it out on their own. And who knows, maybe then they start themselves, like you, having their own personal experiences from seeking it as a side effect. And then slowly, I think we kind of raise our collective awareness to this thing, you know. But I don't see it happening in my lifetime where, we get that big disclosure. I just don't think that that's. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that that is how it's going to happen, unless they just show up everywhere, kind of like an arrival, which I think would be dope. By the way, if they all just giant eggs just showed up everywhere, and even in arrival, they showed up and they just kind of sat there
Yeah.
and they didn't do anything. They just waited.
Yeah.
And until all the panic sort of settled down, they had all the military come out, the guns pointed, and they still waited. And it was like, oh, and then everybody kind of like calmed down. It's like, all right, now we're going to go approach them. So, you know, I don't know. I just think that as long as we keep having these conversations, perhaps in a couple generations, the children will be raised with the knowledge that ETs are real and UFOs are here. They've been here. They've been interacting with us. And maybe at that stage, seeing one won't make them want to, roundhouse a gray. So that's the hope.
Yeah. My biggest worry was that if I thought quite a lot about this, and what if like day two just nothing happens? In that same situation as you described, there's a bit of craziness, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, what's next? We've got these eggs that have landed, and that's the thing. I think that a lot of people are pinning the positive future on some kind of, disclosure happens, we hear about it, and then we get some technology that's going to, make everything free and give us a great life and reduce our cost of living, and everyone's going to, there's going to be world peace and it's going to be wonderful. But what if it was just, yeah, there's something real that's out there and it's, we confirm it, but back to work, guys, still going to pay your tax. Yeah, that's the scary part, I think, because I think that's like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Is we're sort of chasing that, hoping that if we get there,
Mm-hmm.
then there's going to be something sort of magical at the end. And what if, it's sort of magical having an idea of what's out there that we didn't understand, and perhaps it rewrites the history books. But then we still have to go back to work, or then we still have to, feed our
Yeah.
families and pay our electricity bills, and there's still wars going on and still conflict, and we're still hating our neighbors and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's just sad. But
Yeah.
then there's
Yeah.
a
I
lot of
mean,
people out
that's happened to a lot of experiencers
there.
who have seen the phenomenon, who have been abducted, who have, dealt with this. To them, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
People are
yeah,
just carrying on, so there probably is that sense of frustration and that sense of like, again, you just end up being like, all right, I guess that was it. you
yeah.
know I but like you said, I think I I I just don't think that it's going to be this like world peace thing right away. I don't think we're ready for that. And Danny Sheehan had a great analogy. You've probably heard it before about the butterfly. Have you heard that analogy?
No, no, I didn't hear that one.
So he talks about this guy who collects butterflies, and he says, he's missing the monarch. He's like the one he's missing for his collection. He has this like beautiful butterfly enclosure in the back of his home, and he finally sees like a little caterpillar that would eventually become a monarch, and he captures it and he puts it in this little sort of terrarium with cotton and like a light, and he sees it makes a cocoon. And one day the cocoon starts breaking open and all these threads start opening, and this, beautiful monarch is starting to fight its way out of the cocoon, and these threads are popping one by one as it's emerging from this cocoon. And then there's one string holding it together, and the monarch is trying so hard to just, and it keeps like just kind of like giving up because it doesn't have the strength to break this last, and it just gives up. And so the person who put them there, he takes scissors and he cuts that last thread, and then the monarch is free. But now the monarch can't fly because it needed to break that last thread in order to develop those muscles, in order to flap its wings, but now it can't, and it's a flightless monarch. And so, I think I think it's a great analogy for where we're at, perhaps with, our connection to this consciousness quantum field, or all these psi abilities, or you hear the buzzword psionics and all this stuff. I think maybe if they were here and gave us this stuff, or told us the secret, I don't think we'd be ready for it. I think we'd be much like that butterfly. It would put us in a worse position than a better one. And so I think, part of what I think is happening is they're just kind of like making sure we just don't kill each other, and hopefully like we figure it out before it's too late. But who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful analogy. It's that evolving, isn't it? I mean, I've long had that thought that it's assisting us to evolve in order for us to be ready to understand, and we're not quite ready to understand. But every now and again, we just get a little seed planted that just helps to grow this next level of evolution.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Fantastic. Well, look, Chris, I'm really conscious of your time. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you so much for speaking to me. And I could talk to you all day, but I'm conscious of how busy you clearly are because you're keeping everything going. It's impressive, man. I don't know how you do it, how you structure your
Well,
time. I'd love to know, because I'm like a duck under, with the feet underwater, just flapping like this, and on top, I'm like, I'm okay, but I'm going like crazy.
yeah, same. Scheduling, I think for me is a new thing. I haven't. I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'll just wing it until the stress and anxiety builds up. And so scheduling's been big for me, and jotting down like to-do lists and filling those out has been a real blessing. I think it's simple, but something about filling out those checklists and feeling proud of the little accomplishments you get done throughout the day. I think it goes a long way. Yeah. But Jimmy, thank you so much for taking the time, because obviously you're busy as well, and I appreciate you giving me a voice on your platform. And keep doing what you're doing, man. It's resonating with a lot more people than you might think. Not everybody who watches these videos reaches out to you, but know that it's touching a lot of people. And I'd like to think you've made a big difference in this discussion, in moving that needle, forward. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, it's really kind, Chris. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you, man. Well, look, let's keep in touch, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. Let me know.